word I want to redeem is the word Pentecostal. So I'm a Pentecostal. If you didn't know this, you're a Pentecostal, or you're attending a Pentecostal church. Kingdomcity is a Pentecostal church, and it's a beautiful, Pentecostal's a beautiful word that unfortunately got hijacked by weirdos, right? So what happens is all you got to do to hijack a good word is let weirdos own it. You know, you don't want to do that. And so then people who've never heard of Pentecostals, they think about the weirdos instead of what it actually is. And so I want to restore the beauty of that word today. I got grieved by this because I thought, man, I was asked on a golf course by a guy that's never been to church, and he was telling me his story. He said, have you ever heard of the Pentecostals, you know? And I was like, I don't know. Why don't you tell me what you think about that? So, and I realized that, man, something has hijacked that word. So I started doing informal surveys. When I say informal, I walked up to people and asked in the foyer who were attending Pentecostal churches, do you know what Pentecostal means? And almost no one did. Here are a few answers these are real answers that I got from actual human beings. One, we're the loud worshipers, right? Good, yeah. I do prefer that over quiet worshiping. And you know, I prefer the energy and the atmosphere. And again, amen, but I'm not sure that's what we want to be known worldwide for, the volume of our music. One that particularly bothered me was we're the true worshipers, you know, as opposed to all those fake worshipers. Like, what do you mean? One of the most common answers was we're the tongue talkers. Okay, amen, you know, and please, I honor the fact that spiritual language is a part of our spiritual formation, and it's a grace given to us by God. But I'm positive we don't want to be known worldwide for simply tongue talking. I'm pretty sure about that. A common answer was, we're the ones that believe in end times. Right. So do we want to be known for our amateur predictions of doom? Pentecostals aren't supposed to be known for, it's okay to have a conviction and not have to be known for it. So I want to talk to you about this word, because when we think about the word Pentecostal or Pentecost, we think about Acts chapter 2. And Acts chapter 2 is a bizarre story where a bunch of people in an upper room together and their heads catch on fire and no one's screaming in agony and they're speaking in languages, but they tend to hear each other in ways they can understand. It is an absolutely bizarre story taken on its own. But when you realize that Luke is actually not a news reporter, he's an ancient historian tying some things together for folks, it'll begin to make sense. Which leads me to the book of Exodus. The book of Exodus is where we find something we call the Ten Commandments. Now, I'm not mad at calling it Ten Commandments. I call it Ten Commandments. You call it Ten Commandments. I have a whole series called the Ten Commandments. But in the Jewish world, it's not called Ten Commandments. It's called a 10-word marriage proposal, which should lead to any reasonable person going, well, why would they see it as a proposal of relationship? What makes it seem that way? So I want to talk to you about that by explaining the basics of the entire book of Exodus right now. So the entire book of Exodus is outlined in the formula of the progression of an ancient relationship. That progression would go through 5 stages. So this entire sermon is going to center around 5 words. And I'm going to teach you a little bit of Hebrew today, and we're going to say it back with some Go Kingdomcity gusto. So if you're here in the room here, or if you're in Putra, I want you to participate. Yes, you. Yep. Ma'am, on the front row. I'm wearing the Navy blazer. Yep. I think Ann is your name. Yeah. Why are you turning around? What are you doing? Like, I'm talking to you. Yeah, I'm talking to you. I want you to lead the charge of repeating these words with some gusto. So I'm going to teach you the 5 words first, and then we'll repeat them. The 5 words are Laka. The second one is a bit more staccato. It's like Sigula, right? The third one is Mikvah. The fourth one is, again, staccato, Kuba. And the 5th one is Hoopa. All right, so with some Go Kingdomcity gusto, everybody in Putra, led by Ann on the front row wearing the Navy jumper, right? Let's try that together. It sounds like this. Laka, ready, go. Laka. The second one, staccato, Sigula. Let's try that. Ready, go. Sigula. The third one is Mikvah. Let's try that one. Ready, go. Mikvah. The 4th one is Kuba. Let's try that one. Go. Kuba. And the 5th one is Hoopa. Let's try that one. Go. Hoopa. So Laka, Sigula, Mikvah, Kuba, and Hoopa. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell a parable. A parable is a made-up story. It's totally fiction and has no literal truth to it. but metaphorically and symbolically, it has profound truth. So I'm gonna tell a made up story that has no literal truth to it, but it'll reveal how these words worked in their world. So let's say I'm dating someone, and let's say her name is Pam, right? And Pam and I are loving each other, man. We're in that initial stage of attraction that's awesome. In psychology, it's called limerence. Limerence is the initial stage of attraction when an involuntary rush of dopamine enters your brain when you're in the presence of somebody. It makes you feel addicted to them. They have a hard time explaining how this works, but this is that phase in the relationship that when you get off work, you rush to be together for the entirety of the night. You can't stand to be apart. You're totally addicted. You text all the time. You check your phone every 20 seconds to see if the blue checks are there, to see if she's checked the text. And why hasn't she responded already to said text? You could talk for 4 hours and it feels like 10 minutes, you know? It's that phase of the relationship where you're like, how's it going with Jim? And she's like, awesome. We talked the other night for 4 hours. We listened to each other fall asleep on the phone. It felt like 10 minutes. Now, if you've been married 20 years, a 4-hour talk sounds like hell. Like, why are we having such problems that we need? But not in this phase. This is the phase where you're enjoying each other so much, but a lot of it's pretend as well, because you're kind of scared of losing them because you're addicted to them. So you don't really present, you present who you actually are in phases, right? And if you don't, you're kind of a psychopath, right? You're kind of like, you know, if I was like, here's everything I am right up front, take me or leave me, she's gonna leave you, okay? So you're just kind of going through this, and this is where, I mean, look, if you've been married 20 years, think about your husband, ma'am. Just think about the husband that you've been married to for 20 years, you love him with all your heart, and think about your first date, right? Don't ask him to think about it, he doesn't remember, right? He doesn't, and it's not because we don't love you, it's because we don't remember all that crap, all right? But you'll remember your first date, and I want you to think about what he was wearing that night, and think about what you know about him now. Was he actually wearing what he wanted to, you know? Did he actually order what he wanted to? No, he's likely trying to impress you, right? This is that phase in dating where you're like ordering healthy, you know? You're like, can I take your order? You're like, I'll have 2 grilled chicken breasts, some rice pilaf, and some broccoli, you know? And even as it's coming out of your mouth, you're like, what am I doing right now, right? But if you go to that same restaurant 20 years later to celebrate your anniversary, he's not ordering grilled chicken, broccoli, and rice. He's ordering 20 fried chicken wings, some French fries, and a beer, right? And she's like, God, you're disgusting. What's changed? And he's like, you stuck with me now, baby. You are married to all this. That's how it goes, right? And so you get through that phase, and then at some point the phase goes, it turns to a conversation like, is this relationship gonna go somewhere else? Like, you know, are we going somewhere serious? And we decide we are. Well, once we decide that, the word Pam would be longing me to say is Laka. So Laka would be me initiating the seriousness of the relationship. So we go out on a date, and we go to one of the better restaurants here in Sunway, Dragon O, right? And she's loving Dragon O, and she gets the extra spicy chili fried chicken, right? And I'm thinking, she's the woman for me. So I take her to her home after the date, I hold her by the hand, and I say, Pam, Laka. Well, she can barely contain her excitement. And can you blame her? Because if you sleep in and drink Coke, you too can one day have a body that looks like this. She goes in. She calls her 3 best friends. He said Laka to me. He said Laka to me. Oh, yeah. He said Laka. Facebook status change. Laka. Laka means to take as my own. Now, I know it's 2024, and women today be like, what, you gonna take me, you know? It was more romantic than that. Think of it as, will you be mine, all right? So this family of Israelites, they moved to Egypt because they sold their brother there, only to later need him to save their sorry rear ends from a famine. And the brother, instead of killing them, actually gives them a piece of land, and then they overpopulate the thing, and they end up enslaved. And then God, 400 and something years later, rescues them from slavery. And this is terrifying and freeing all at the same time. Think about this. If all you know about a God is that he's infinitely powerful, but you know nothing about his character, that's terrifying. Because what's he gonna do when he calls this chip in? When he asks you to give it back? Like, is it gonna be cut yourself? Is it gonna be sacrifice your children? Anything would have been on the table. All they know about him is that he's infinitely powerful, but they don't know much about his loving character. And so he speaks up. And this is the first thing he says. This is Exodus chapter 6. And I'll free you from being slaves to them. Awesome. And I'll redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. And I will take you as my own. The word is Laka. As far as I know, from every civilization and every culture in the history of the world, this is the first mention of any God from any civilization from anywhere in the world that was addressing people as people to be related to instead of objects and instruments to be used. Every other God was, hey, you come to my temple, my rituals, my image, my moment, and I might act on your behalf. This God, in response to what do you want from us, is I want a relationship with you. To them, it would have been like, is God using relational talk? Like, does God want a relationship? This would have been, to us, we use that language all the time. Like, God wants to be in your life. God wants a relationship with you. Like, we use that, we're used to that. Imagine being the first people to ever hear something like that. That would be terrifying. Like, what's it gonna be like to relate to you? Now, once I say Laka, back to our parable, what's the next word Pam wants to hear? She wants me to say Sigula. Now, the women will understand this, the men, not so much, but the Laka doesn't last very long. Like the the specialness of it. Pam's friends, three weeks after I say Laka, Pam's friends would have been like, has he said Sigula yet? Has he said, are you worried? Do you think he has a commitment problem? You know? And Pam's like, shut up. He'll say Sigula when he's good and ready. Deep in her heart, she knows she wants me to say it. So we go on a date. We go to Thai. And she gets the green curry extra spicy. It's a brave call for a date night. I think to myself, ooh, this is my kind of woman. I take her to her home. I hold her by the hand and I say, Pam, Sigula. Well, she can barely contain her excitement. She goes inside. She calls her three best friends. He said Sigula to me. He said Sigula to me. Oh, yeah. He said Sigula. Facebook status change. Sigula. Sigula is Laka 2.0. It's upgraded Laka. Sigula means treasured possession. Again, I realize it's 2024. Women be like, what, you think you own me? It was, okay. It was more romantic than that. It was like special treasure. It was like, okay, so Laka was, will you be mine? Sigula was, will you be the most important thing in my whole world? The most important person, like in other words, we're gonna have our passions, our desires, our mission, our calling, the things we put our energy into, but at the end of the day, no, you will never be second. It's like you will be the most important person in my life. So this group of people, in Exodus chapter 6, they hear Laka. Same exact group of people, Exodus 19, verse 5. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. The word is Sigula. Again, terrifying. What does keep my covenant mean? What does keep my commands? He hasn't given any clue as to what he's going to expect. All they know so far is that he's infinitely powerful, but don't know how loving he can be. Now, back to our parable. Once I say Laka and Sigula, the next word Pam wants to hear is Mikvah. Now, Mikvah is a special word. It was a 3-day notice that in 3 days, I'm gonna ask you to marry me, right? See, okay, so let me illustrate this. I'm 48, that'll remove some of the mystery from that, all right? I'm 48, and so back when I was of dating age, a long time ago, there was a certain mystery around when you were gonna ask someone to marry you. Like, you know, you would have conversations with your girlfriends like, is tonight the night? Girl, do you think tonight's the night? Is he gonna ask you tonight? And Pam's like, I hope so. I hope he's gonna ask me tonight. I don't wanna get my hopes up though. What makes you think he's gonna ask you tonight? Well, it's like, girl, he has booked a $200 a night steakhouse and he normally takes you to Nando's. The chances that tonight's the night is high. Now, in today's world, there's no mystery because of social media, right? Look, if your boyfriend drives you to the base of a mountain where it runs into the ocean and there's already a photographer there, tonight's the night. In the ancient world, there was no mystery. You said mikvah, and then 3 days later, the proposal happened, right? There was no mystery at all. Now, this might surprise you. It surprised me, to be honest with you. One of the key things that propelled my speaking career was actually being asked to do big women's conferences. One of the biggest things I did early on was I did like a state level women's conference for the Assemblies of God, and then every pastor's wife is there, and then I get asked. That's how. Right. So I've done some of the bigger women's conferences. I spoke one time in a basketball arena full of women, 7,000 women, and me. It was harrowing, to be honest with you. And I've been asked to do some version of this message. And so you can hear it. You go, Laka means my own. And when there's 7,000 women, you can hear it. It's like, oh, that is so beautiful. Oh. Sigula means special treasure. And you can hear it. It's like, oh, that is so beautiful. Mikvah is far less romantic. Mikvah means go wash. Girl, you need a bath. Mikvah's telling a woman to bathe. The idea is in 3 days, I'm gonna ask you to marry me, and I'd love for you to be ceremonially clean so we can touch. It's that simple. There's a common theme in the Bible. The most overkill in the whole Bible was the book of Esther, where it says that Esther bathed in perfume for a year before she went in to see her husband, which I think we could all agree is a bit overkill, right? Like, look, if you need to bathe in perfume for a year before you go see your husband, you probably need to see a doctor, right? It's like, girl, you hiding something, right? So the same group of people, they've heard Laka, they've heard Sigula. Exodus 19, verse 10, 5 verses later. And the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready by the third day. Mikvah, 3 days from now, I'm gonna ask you to marry me. Now, no tricks. This is Exodus 19, verse 10. What happens 3 days after Exodus 19? Exodus 20. Sign up for Bible overview. It's 24 sessions of that level of bam. 3 days after Exodus 19, Exodus 20. Can you see how in the Jewish culture they see Exodus 20, the 10 Commandments, as a marriage proposal? It's actually a ketubah, a 10-word marriage proposal. Now, back to our 5 words, Laka, Sigula, Mikvah. Now, I'm gonna do the last 2 words together, ketubah and Hoopa. So 3 days after I say mikvah, Pam and I come together for the marriage proposal. Words matter less than how we picture words working, right? And so in our world, a marriage proposal normally involves someone on their knee, a diamond ring, and will you marry me? It's a question of, hey, in that world, it was actually much more transactional, much more legal. What you would do is you would get together and write a ketubah. A ketubah was a marriage proposal. It was basically, you're laying out your expectations for the relationship up front. What's in bounds, what's out of bounds, you know, how many kids, how are we gonna do this, how are we gonna relate to the in-law, all of this stuff would have been in the ketubah. And we would write it. And this is a caricature, but you don't want the deep version. I could put anything in the ketubah I wanted, and she could put anything in the ketubah she wanted, so long as we both agreed. Because how can 2 walk together lest they be agreed? This is wedding talk. This is relationship talk. Once we wrote it, I would then propose marriage to her. But it wasn't like, will you marry me? It was more like, will you marry? Like, based on what we just agreed to, is this the kind of relationship that you want to engage with? And after we were married, if either one of us broke that ketubah in an unrepentant pattern, not like a mistake, but an unrepentant pattern, it was called marital unfaithfulness. It was like you're breaking your basic agreement. So pay very close attention to the language. It'll sound very familiar to you. I would say, will you marry me? And she would say, yes. And I would say, great. Then I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there you may be also. And she would say, when are you gonna come back to receive me unto yourself? And I would say, I do not know the day or the hour, but when my Father approves the wedding chamber I'm building for you, he'll send me back. But be watchful and ready with oil in your lamps for my return. Does that sound familiar? So when Jesus is using words like this, again, it's affirming the relational nature of his desire to be a part of our life. So I would leave Pam and I would go to my Father's house and make a room. See, this gets confusing for us because in our world, our children get married and leave, right? Hopefully, right? Look, I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but if you're 38 and still living at home, your parents are ready for you to move out, right? But in their world, no one could afford that. They had these family compounds. I've seen historical ruins of them. I've walked through them. An ancient Jewish house like this would have been, the size of the stage. And there was a central hallway. And just picture it simply, room, 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 room. And then when you got to the street front, that was your family store or your business. And the basics of it was the youngest people lived in the back of the house. And then as you got older, you started graduating to the middle of the house. When you got old, you went to the front of the house. And when you died, you moved out of the house. That's how that worked. And so I would build a room on my Father's house. In my Father's house are many rooms. In other words, this is a relational talk. Like, this is not if one gets, no one else does. There's a lot of space for everyone. This is relational talk. So I would make the room. My father would approve it. I'd go get Pam. And we would come and have a wedding where this was all happening. And at the wedding, there was a Hoopa. A Hoopa was a marriage altar, or literally to be covered in God's presence. Now, if you've ever been to a wedding, you've seen people stand underneath Hoopas. We don't call them Hoopas unless you actually are from a Jewish world, but you would see wedding altars or archways. These are all the same basic symbols. Like, this is happening under the witness of the presence of God. And depending on someone's financial status, depends on how elaborate the Hoopa is. In their world, the Hoopa was simply this. This is a talit. It symbolized the presence of God for them. It was an exact replica of the veil that separated the Holy of Holies from the holy place. And so you would wear it. So all these things in the scripture, like put on the garment of praise, wear Christ. This was the idea is you can't organize your life where God is here but not there, right? And that's a whole nother lesson. But what they would do is they would put 4 sticks in the ground. It was very rudimentary. And they would take the tassels and tie it around the 4 sticks, and it would make a canopy or a Hoopa. The idea is what's happening here is being witnessed by the presence of God. But at a wedding, there was 2 Hoopas. One Hoopa was in front of everybody. The other Hoopa was in private, in the wedding chamber. What they would do is they would take 4 sticks and put it around the wedding bed or the marriage bed, and they would tie the tassels, and it would make a canopy or a covering over the marriage bed. The idea is that when the marriage was consummated, it was witnessed by because remember, covenants had to be witnessed, but since that's not a great spectator sport, right? Well, it's not. You would let God witness it, which was just a lot safer. So what you do is you'd put the 4 sticks in the ground, make a canopy. I would bring Pam to the door. At that moment, I would pick her up. We still do that in most cultures today. It's called carrying them over the threshold. Like on your wedding night, you pick your bride up. It's a good idea for some. For others, I wouldn't recommend it, right? It's like, I can give you a piggyback. Here we go, right? And so what you do is you'd pick your bride up. By the way, that's where we get the word rapture from. The word rapture has nothing to do with escaping. It has to do with being caught up into the fullness of the love of the person who loves you. And so I would catch her up. We'd go in there and consummate the marriage underneath the Hoopa. This gets a little awkward because in our world, we're very private about our sexuality. They couldn't be in their world. They live too close, right? So I'd go in there and shut the door, and then people just waited for us to be done, which was like, But remember, back then they got married at 13, So 20 seconds later, here we go, we're ready. We're ready to party now. Now that's the whole process. And so this group of people, in Exodus chapter 6, I will take you as my own, Laka. Exodus chapter 19, verse 5, out of the whole earth you will be my Sigula. Exodus chapter 19, verse 10, Mikvah. 3 days later, here comes the Kuba. And here's how it starts. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God. So the 10 commandments are not 10 conditions for God to love us. It's 10 proofs he already does. Anoki, Jehovah Elohim. The relief would have been Anoki, Jehovah Elohim. Now, if you know anything about Hebrew, you can say, I am the Lord your God with 2 words, Jehovah Elohim. But the first word of this marriage proposal is Anoki. It's a word that it really is unnecessary, which means it's really, really important. Now, just a quick thing that we learned in Bible overview, okay? All Hebrew letters are pictures. All Hebrew words are comic strips. So it tells a story. When you put the picture on the word Anoki, the A is an ox head going into a yoke. The N is fish multiplying. It looks like a musical crescendo. The CH is a hedge or a fence. And then the Y is an upraised hand. It means to praise, surrender, or submit. So when these first people heard this first word of the marriage proposal, here's what they would have seen. Your authority is multiplying inside the hedge of praise and submission. In other words, I am here to make you bigger. Like, oh, can you imagine the relief? Like, you're here for us? Yes, so you don't need us to serve you. We would do that out of a response of your love for, yes. Oh, and by the way, if you read the 10 Commandments as a wedding proposal, it gets very beautiful very quick. Hey, don't have any other gods before me. In other words, if we're gonna be married, I'd like to be the only one, right? Hey, don't have idols. In other words, if we're gonna be married, could you put the pictures of your old boyfriends away? That'd be awesome. Hey, don't take my name in vain. And by the way, that's not a language issue. That's not like saying, oh my God, or something. Although that's distasteful, we probably shouldn't do it. It's actually, the word in Hebrew is nasa. It's don't carry, it literally says, don't carry the name in a way that disappoints the hope that rests upon it. In other words, if you've got lost in that, it's don't put the fish on your car that identifies you as a Christian and then point your finger at the sky when someone cuts you off in traffic. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't wear the cross around the neck and then abuse the waitress for taking too long to get your drinks. Come on, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't wear the WWJD bracelet and then abuse your spouse when they disappoint you. Yuck. Don't do that. Don't wear. Jesus said it this way. He said, beware of people who wear their tassels too long. In other words, beware of people who are too loud about what they believe and not loud enough about a demonstration of love to their world. Be careful. In other words, don't sign checks I wouldn't sign. You're gonna have power of attorney on my name. In other words, don't manipulate people by saying God said. Like if you have a pretty poorly thought out idea and no one's buying it, that is telling. And don't manipulate people by saying God told me. Don't do, that's yuck. Don't do that. Don't do that. Oh, here's a good idea. Let's take a day off. Again, nobody at the foot of that mountain would have been going, he is putting rules on us. No one. They hadn't had a day off in 430 years. Can you imagine being a slave? Excuse me, I just want to make sure I got this. In our new world, we get a day off? Yes. Here's another one. Don't kill each other, right? It's a really awesome idea, right? But be a slave for a second. Hold on, Lord, I just got a question. So in our new world, the biggest, strongest people can't murder us. No, that's a thing of the past. Because in Egypt, you were seen as objects. In our new world, you're image bearers. And that's two different things. You can't, your life's valuable. You can't do that. You can't do that. Oh, hey, don't sleep with each other's wives. Again, a very good idea, but try to be a slave for a second. Hold on, I just wanna make sure I understand this. In our new world, the biggest, strongest people can't rape our women? No, your wife is protected. Those women would have been raped a lot in Egypt, in Egyptian culture. When you're the slave and they're the owner, you're an object, not an image bearer. It's like, oh, right, this is awesome. Oh, don't take each other's things. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. In our new world, the biggest, strongest people can't just take whatever they want from us? No, you're an image bearer, not an object. I'm here to make you bigger. Wow. Oh, I just want to make sure I got this right. So in our new world, my life, my wife, and my stuff are all protected, and we get a day off. Yes, Yes, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life. But marriages don't end with ketubas. They culminate with hoopas. So Exodus 20, verse 18. This is right after don't covet. It says, when the people saw the thunder and the lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. What an odd sentence. When the people saw the thunder, how do you see thunder? You can understand seeing lightning, but how do you see thunder? And it's not like the author didn't know how to say heard. It says they saw thunder and lightning and smoke, and they heard trumpets. So it's weird. Why would he say it? Well, just a quick language study here. The word translated thunder is actually kole, which everywhere else is voices or languages. Lightning is fire. By the way, it's the same two words Moses used when he said, I saw the voice of God in the fire in the burning bush. Same exact idea. And so you have this thing where they're standing there after the ketubah, and it says the presence of God covered them in smoke. Hoopa. And they looked up and saw languages inside fire sitting above their head. What would the voices have been saying? Will you marry me? The Talmud says that on this day in history, God proposed to all of creation by using 70,000 tongues of fire that went as far as the eye could see. In his great book, Eternity in Their Hearts, by the great missionary Don Richardson, he talks about this idea. In 1857, in Rangoon, Burma, an English sociologist was studying the Kirin people, and he asked them, who is your God? And their answer was, we serve a God named Yahweh, who proposed to us thousands of years ago with languages of fire above our head. It's almost like God was always reaching out to the whole world. So, you married people. Every year on the day you got married, what do? You celebrate your anniversary. It's a really good idea to remind yourself. I used to could talk to you for 4 hours at a time, and it was awesome. It's memories, it's everything we've been through. It's celebrating what's formed us. It's brilliant. So here's what God does. He says, every year on this day, I want you to celebrate your anniversary with me. And the celebration of this day is called Pentecost. Pentecost originated in Exodus 20, not in Acts chapter 2. And so every year they get together and celebrate Pentecost. And Pentecost was an awesome celebration because Pentecost centered around leavened bread. You can read about it in Leviticus 16, Leviticus 23, or you can just take my word for it. Other feasts centered around unleavened bread, but Pentecost centered around leavened bread. They would cut it. They would put olive oil on it. Why? Because it tastes good, but it was also symbolic. Pentecost was a celebration that God wants relationship with me, leaven and all, issues and all, flaws and all. The clear message of Pentecost is no one within the sound of my voice is done something so heinous or so broken or so disordered that God is not willing to engage your broken life just as you are, as the old song used to sing. Pentecost was a celebration of God's willingness to humble himself, to be in relationship with flawed people. It was a celebration that when I allow God into my disordered story, he involves himself in it to write a better narrative about it. So in Acts chapter 2, these people are together celebrating Pentecost. There would have been a leavened loaf of bread that would have been cut, and olive oil would have been put on it. They would have been remembering God wants to be with us. They would have been remembering Exodus 20. They'd have been remembering this stuff. And then it says that when they were all together, the presence of God covered them in a cloud. And they looked up, and languages inside fire were sitting above their head. So the same exact thing is happening on the same exact day. The only difference is this time they spoke back, which is the birth of the church, which is the bride of Christ. But you know what they didn't do? They didn't show up there every day simply staring at the sky, waiting for God to do something else. Every eventual moment with God is not meant to stand alone for us to just looking for the next thing. It's meant to inspire us to go change our world. I want to put some language around what you guys did a couple weeks ago with the miracle offering, something you could attach your faith 2. In Acts chapter 2, after this happened, it says that they went outside and they sold all that they could and they blessed the poor and the afflicted amongst them. Why would they do that? What an odd thing. It's because that was the command of Pentecost. Check this out in Leviticus 23. On that same day, you're to proclaim a sacred assembly and do no regular work. This is to be a lasting ordinance for the generations to come, wherever you live. Oh, and when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner residing amongst you. Why? Oh, I am the Lord your God. Anarchy, Jehovah, Elohim. He reminds them of his proposal. And here's the thing, right? If you need a good visual, here's what a Pentecostal is. A Pentecostal is someone that when the presence of God touches their leavened story, they don't just sit around waiting for the next thing. They get so inspired by that they go and bless others without their ability to pay us back. Love is a function of treating people as they are worth despite what they might deserve. That's what a Pentecostal is. A Pentecostal person is someone that is so aware that God has touched my life despite me not deserving any of it, that I can't help but use my resources to go bless somebody else. That's what Kingdom City just went through a couple of weeks ago and last week, and it's still available to you this week. It's like, hey, wait a minute. Do you simply believe in God, or is God someone you've asked to fundamentally change the way you see your whole world? And when we become aware that God has touched our story, despite us not deserving it, but because God thinks we're worth it despite that, when the presence of God touches our leavened lives, we can't help but use our resources differently. Kingdom City, I want you to be the most Pentecostal church in the world. Yes, worship with noise and atmosphere and volume and energy, and do use your spiritual language and do be educated. But at the end of the day, be known for your excessive compassion, generosity, and kindness. For when God touches our leavened beings, we can't help but treat others in kind. I want you to think about it today. Where can I be the most Pentecostal person in my whole community? Where can I be so aware that God has touched my life that I can't help but use my resources to touch other people's life who can't do anything in return? I want you all to be the most Pentecostal people in the world. Until I see you again tonight, grace and peace, everybody.